It's down to the wire for US President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden. With just 1 day left before Election Day, both of these candidates for the US presidency are rushing for those last-minute votes in the final hours of campaigning. And today, both of these men are headed to the battleground state of Pennsylvania. Now, Mr. Biden, he's scheduled to hold at least 3 major events today. He narrowly leads Mr. Trump in that battleground state by just 4 percentage points. Trump, on the other hand, he's going to be putting Air Force One to good use. He's been doing that a lot in the last couple of weeks. He's going to be heading to another swing state, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Florida. Now, in the last 24 hours alone, the president has held rallies in 5. That's right, 5 other states that we know of. And one was in North Carolina. The other was where the president, once again, he cast doubt on the integrity of the election. That is something, a narrative which he's also been speaking about in the past few weeks. He says that his lawyers, in fact, might get involved, and that is if this vote count stretches beyond Election Day. And there's a high possibility that it may just do that. Now, Americans have, as we know, been rushing to get those early ballots in, either by early in-person voting or by mail-in ballots. 93 million of those ballots already cast. Let's take a listen.
I think it's a terrible thing when ballots can be collected after an election. I think it's a terrible thing when people or states are allowed to tabulate ballots for a long period of time after the election is over, because it can only lead to one thing, and that's very bad. You know what that thing is. I think it's a very dangerous, terrible thing. And I think it's terrible when we can't know the results of an election the night of the election in a modern-day age of computer.
Joe Biden, meantime, his schedule is focused on Pennsylvania. That's where he's going to concentrate his efforts on the final day of campaigning with his signature drive-through rallies, the ones we've come to be very used to now. He's described Donald Trump as the real virus, and he's accused the administration of severely mishandling this pandemic.
We choose hope over fear. We choose unity over division. We choose science over fiction. And yes, we choose truth over lies, the multiple lies he repeats. It's time to stand up. It's time to take back our democracy.
And Mr. Trump has also suggested that he might fire his top coronavirus expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci. His comments have come after Dr. Fauci criticized the White House's response over the pandemic. These chants broke out at Mr. Trump's Florida rally. That's after Dr. Fauci said the government policy on the virus needs to change. He said that the U.S. could not possibly be positioned more poorly ahead of winter as people continue to ignore safe distancing.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election. I appreciate the advice. I appreciate that. No, he's been wrong on a lot. He's a nice man, though. He's been wrong on a lot.
Simon Marks joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Good morning, Simon. Lots of activity on this last day of campaigning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you were saying Air Force One is going to be put through its paces. You were absolutely right there, Dawn. I think 6 rallies President Trump will be hosting today. Looking at his schedule, we're going to see him in North Carolina, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, and then back in Michigan again. So the president trying to leave absolutely nothing to chance. Joe Biden, by contrast, and characteristically has a slightly quieter day, holding rallies in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and then culminating with a big kind of campaign send-off, a closing event that's going to be hosted by Lady Gaga in Pittsburgh. The 2 candidates essentially trying to do 2 things simultaneously. One, trying to reach that very, very tiny number of undecided floating voters that are still out there to come over to their side before polling ends on Tuesday night. But secondly, of course, to mount an effective get-out-the-vote operation, because in an election where it is already apparent that we are looking at record turnout. Getting their supporters to the polls in the dwindling hours of this election is going to be absolutely vital. In some of those battleground states, there may be razor-thin margins separating those candidates from one another, and that's why the candidates want to get as many of their supporters to the polls as possible.
Lots of pressure on those last-minute undecided voters this morning, Simon. Simon, Dr. Fauci, let me get your thoughts on that one, because Dr. Fauci is a well-respected voice here in America. How will Mr. Trump's comments about him land with voters today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to underscore that Dr. Fauci is more respected, polls show, in terms of his handling of COVID-19 and the advice that he gives than President Donald Trump. And you could hear in that final clip there that President Trump remains very wary of firing Dr. Fauci. He knows that Anthony Fauci has been a highly respected fixture in this town for 40 years, offering undiluted public health advice to Republican and Democrat presidents alike. And what Dr. Fauci is saying is what many people in the United States believe is absolutely obvious. The U.S. could not be in a worse place right now in terms of the growing number of infections. We're right on the brink of seeing 100,000 new cases of COVID-19 in the United States every single day. There were 99,000 cases in a 24-hour period reported over the weekend. And so, look, I think it's hard to imagine that there are undecided voters out there that are going to be making their decisions in this election purely over this latest spat between Dr. Fauci and President Trump. But it does indicate the weaponized nature of COVID-19 as an issue in this campaign.
Meantime, Simon, anybody walking through the streets here in Washington, D.C. would have seen just how many precautions are being taken ahead of Election Day tomorrow. Lots of storefronts and facades of buildings being completely boarded up. It seems more and more every single day. How real is the threat of unrest, though?
Look, I think it's very important to underscore we have never seen anything like this during an election in the United States. Those images of buildings in the center of Washington, in New York City, in many other cities across the country being boarded up, this sense of foreboding as election week gets underway. It doesn't feel much like a celebration of democracy. It feels like there is tremendous tension and anxiety pulsing through this society over where the next few days are going to head. And that sense of tension is being fueled by the fact that both campaigns are lawyered up to the hilt. President Trump, as you know, is threatening to take legal action the second the polls close in some of those swing states, Ohio and Pennsylvania, to try and suggest that postal votes should not be counted if they arrive after Election Day. You heard there he's furious with the Supreme Court for saying that in North Carolina they can count the votes up to 9 days after Election Day. But the president is factually creating a straw man here. These postal votes are always counted in American elections. There's nothing in law that says we have to know the result on election night or in the early hours of Wednesday morning. And a vote that is submitted by post has exactly the same weight and value as a vote that is submitted by someone who goes and stands in a queue at a polling station and waits to cast that vote. So, look, I think that we're in for very uncertain hours here. If the outcome of the races in some of these battleground states is close and it all comes down to those postal votes, and we're going to see President Trump and possibly on the other side the Democrats as well litigating about the rules of the game after the final whistle in the game, the closing of the polling stations, is blown.
Well, while we wait for those votes over the next day or 2 days or weeks even, Simon, somebody's going to be moving into that building behind me. Simon, thank you very much for that. Simon Marks there from right here in Washington, D.C.